So again, today's topic will be marketing in your organization. So how does your organization market? As a provider agency, it is important to recognize how you market your organization. The current workforce crisis is affecting businesses across the nation, not just Ohio, but with a strong marketing plan, your organization can stay ahead of the curve and create interest. I'd like to start here with a video, just kind of gives a marketing introduction, a little 101, and then we can move forward there of talking about how this particularly applies to the developmental disabilities field.
What is marketing? How would you explain marketing? The first few words that usually pop into a person's head are marketing equals sales. Marketing is not just personal selling or even just advertising. Most people define marketing in a very limited way. Marketing includes activities such as public relations, sales promotion, advertising, social media, pricing, distribution, and many other functions. Companies have increased their marketing budgets dramatically. For example, it is estimated that companies spend over $15 billion annually on marketing to just kids. This is an increase of over 2.5 times more than they were spending in 1992. The cumulative function of marketing is to communicate, deliver, and create value to the consumer. In addition, companies must take into consideration their employees, stakeholders, and society. The most successful companies engage in very consumer-oriented marketing. They spend enormous amounts of time, money, and resources examining the everyday lives of their customers, and then create products to fill a need. Examples of companies that are known for creative, leading-edge marketing are Disney, Pepsi, Apple, and Procter & Gamble. Marketing is made up of 4 elements: product, place, promotion, and price. The elements must be used in a cohesive plan to effectively target the consumer. A product can be either a physical product or a service. Place is where the product is purchased. Price is the amount a consumer pays for the product, and promotion consists of the communication tools used to effectively get the company's message out. The official definition of marketing is it is a philosophy that's main focus is providing customer satisfaction. Marketing is the activity, set of institutions, and processes for creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, clients, partners, and society at large. Also included in the definition are all of the activities that help businesses reach their target market effectively. The ultimate outcome for marketing is when a successful exchange occurs.
Okay, so I want to go back and just highlight a couple of sections here and talk about how this applies to the developmental disabilities field. There's some things in that a lot of people might think and compare that to maybe like a sales business. And that's why I like the very beginning of the video, is because it explains that marketing as a whole is not just sales. A lot of people, when they think about, how does my company sell the company? That's not the entire picture. The public relations piece, I think, applies on a regular basis to our field, because the CEO, and I know that's what a lot of people who, whether that be the director, CEO, the title changes amongst provider agencies, but a lot of times as a DSP, they might not know who the CEO is. And so if you are marketing your organization to get out there, to get exposure, DSPs may not even know who the person in charge is. And as we'll get into later here, the demographic of which who are becoming the normal or the most popular people who are looking for jobs currently are wanting that. They're wanting that connection to not just their fellow DSPs, but they want to know who's in charge, who's in the office, more than just who's writing my check. I think it goes further than that. And that seems to be possibly, where a lot of this trouble was stemming from, of attracting, because it's not just about money anymore. And we'll also get to that later on as well. Sales promotion, again, I think that may not apply nearly as much to our field, but advertising and social media, I think, are sometimes left skipped, and that can be dangerous, especially when trying to get exposure out there. I know most organizations have a social media platform, but how often is it used? How often is it updated? You know, what innovative things are being used on it to attract attention? Pricing, that necessarily doesn't, but what it can be used for to think about as a whole would be, you know, how much are we able to offer the DSPs and actually attract them. So when combining all of these, I do believe that, you know, it does go just as far in our field as it would, you know, maybe a sales piece. What sets your organization apart? Each and every organization has their strengths and weaknesses, and how can we highlight those strengths? So what I'd like to do for this next piece, Jen, Penny, if you guys could help me. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead a little bit. Let me move this down here really quickly. Okay, so this is what I would like to start with before we move into that activity. But positives of your organization. Each organization has its own unique strengths. Does your organization provide something that other providers do not? Sometimes a staff's happiness with their work does not directly correlate to more money. It is important to consider what else is offered that benefits the staff and keeps them around. The organizational highlights would include, it is important to to self-reflect on your organization, highlight the positives that keep your workforce coming back day to day, which I think can sometimes be forgotten about. You know, we think about bringing in new DSPs, we think about bringing in new staff, whether that be in the office, but just as much attention should be given to the people that are there and come back day to day. And actually, it could be important to ask them why it is that they come back day to day, because that information might be able to be marketed out to attract people, and they may view the same things as important for them to come back day to day. Do your employees feel valued? Are you flexible with your scheduling? Is there room for growth and training opportunities? Does your organization pay above the positional average? Recognizing your strengths is half of the battle when understanding your workforce and how your organization stands out amongst the competition. So here is where I would like to do a little breakout session. So we will go over, I would like you to introduce yourselves and then give each other 3 things that you believe is unique, special, or set you apart from your field. So I'd like you to introduce yourself to each other, just so that way, you know, you have an understanding of where you're from, and possibly if you could give where it is location wise that you're at, you know, the county or something like that, that I know people serve in multiple counties, but just to give an example as to how large, but then please give 3 things that you believe is unique, special, or set yourself apart from others in your field. And then we'll come back together and share a couple of those. Okay, all right. So I hope you guys had some good conversation. I'm excited to hear some of the innovative things, what sets you guys apart in your mind, because it's always good to hear it from the inside. You know, looking at it from the outside, a lot of people have opinions and say that, you know, these people are great at this, or they go out of their way to do this, but it's always nice to hear a self-reflective perspective on, you know, what it is that you think that you do that sets you apart. So if you would like to share, please go ahead and use the hands up feature with the more reactions and then hands up. And then Jen, Penny, if you could pick at least 2 to 3 people to just kind of share what it is that their organization does. And if not, then Jen will call on someone for me, and I appreciate her for that.
Nobody wants to volunteer. I said I'm not shy. I'll call on people.
It looks like Carly Vosberg has raised her hand.
Okay, yes, she has.
Okay, Carly, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So I'm with Capabilities. I'm our HR recruiter here in our Marysville office, but I do recruit for all 11 offices that we have total. One thing I think sets us apart is we really focus on showcasing our staff members. So we do stay interviews with them to make sure all of their concerns are heard. We'll pass those along to the respective people to solve those issues for them. We also did passion videos from each staff member we have in the company. And we post those on Facebook so everybody who's viewing can see those and why Capabilities is such a great place to work at. But one unique thing that I learned from Brandy was that she doesn't really utilize Indeed as much. She has created a pipeline for herself where she gets DSPs from, and I think that is wonderful. So.
Awesome. Well, and that's great. One thing that I really hope that these meetings can create would be conversation amongst everybody who joins, and be able to kind of, like you said, take some things, what's working, what's not working. It sounds like you guys already have a pretty good process about also valuing the people that you have currently in your organization, which is fantastic, because what we don't want to do is forget about them, and then we wonder, why does it seem like we can't retain people just as much as we can bring them in? So I think that's great, and I'm already glad to hear that you guys have, just in that little bit of time that we had there, had conversation, and we're able to kind of bounce things off each other. That's great. Okay, can we get maybe one or two?
Stood out to me also is I love the fact that you are taking the time to listen to your current employees, but then also following through with acting upon it. I think that's a step that often gets overlooked within provider agencies, and it's awesome that you are doing that, because it doesn't do any good to listen if we're not going to respond and address the issue. So great job with that.
Thank you.
Okay, let's do one more.
See any volunteers, so I'm going to call on someone from the list. And let's speak with Deidre Lane.
Brandy did raise her hand, Jen. So it looks like Deidre got off the hook. Yeah.
We'll save you for next time, Deidre.
I could lower my hand and we could put Deidre back on the hook. That kind of sounds like fun. Like she was kind of like, oh, I escaped. Wait, no, I'm back. My name is Brandy and I'm with the Licking County Board of DD. And yeah, I don't really utilize Indeed and Facebook nearly as much as I do. I have a pipeline of community members who send me referrals. And then I do just kind of out of the box things, like I will go to local colleges and high schools and teach the history of disabilities, just to get me in front of people who are 18 to 26-ish, who would make great DSPs. So that's probably my biggest unique thing.
Awesome. I like one thing that really stood out there, and I'm so glad that you said this, because I was really excited to get to this part of the presentation, but we do actually, I have a piece here that is about history and how that can be important, and how that alone can maybe bring in some people who are looking for jobs, not really sure what they want to do, but when they hear the history of our field and exactly how big of an impact that they can make from how our field has grown to where it is today, I think that history can be powerful. So I'm glad that you already apparently are utilizing that, and that's great. I'm excited to hear that, because that's one of my favorite parts of this presentation. So, okay, all right, well, that was great. I'm really glad that you guys had the conversations. It sounds like some things were bounced off, and that's kind of the goal that I would like to do with these. I understand that this is kind of your guys' lunchtime. So just having more conversation than just, being things presented is kind of my goal. So, okay, these are 5 important points of marketing that we're going to go over. And so that's exposure, forecasting, target market, brand, and innovation. So for exposure, consumers recognize marketing exposure when the company creates and promotes a campaign. An organization that presents their values and how they stand amongst the competition can and will bring attention to their mission. Exposure comes in many forms, but today an online presence is essential. Exposure can be reflected internally, how often the administration is present to day-to-day operations and their marketing efforts. A CEO can and should be visible to his or her employees and future employees. Making that connection goes a long way in our field. So one thing I'd like to emphasize here on the exposure piece would be in the position that you are, think like a DSP. Put yourself in that position and think, are you noticed, and why do you feel valued? What is your relationship with the person who, runs the day-to-day operations? If you put yourself in that position, you can say, well, I don't see that person often, or, their exposure is kind of more of a name on a piece of paper, then that might be a change that you should make to have more of a connection to your staff. And another goal that I'd like to do with these meetings would be to ask questions, just so that way you can internally reflect on the questions that I ask. So hopefully that can kind of create some thought processes.
So Kessler, I think that the point that stands out to me the most in that last slide was about really promoting your values. And I think that there's so much competition financially to attract DSPs that's not what's getting people in the door anymore. They want to make sure that they understand how what they're doing has a big impact or a bigger impact on the work that they're doing. So they want to know that piece. They want to know how they fit into that big picture. And so promoting your values is probably the greatest way to attract new staff.
Thank you, Penny.
Mm-hmm.
So one example that I would like to give would be potentially utilizing like a newsletter. A simple newsletter can give an oversight to those curious about what a day-to-day operation looks like. And it can go as far as to possibly give your current staff what is our goal? What are we looking to? What would be some future plans, some ideas? DSPs, when bringing them in, they want to think about how is communication done. If we've heard stories about organizations that, the relationships and communication is done by, text or word of mouth. And sometimes things can get, misinterpreted or whatnot. So just a simple, even if it's monthly, weekly, like just a newsletter might be able to be something that a CEO does just to give their employees an idea about how we're moving forward. So this would just be one tool that you could potentially use to further your exposure within your organization. The second piece would be forecasting. So what will the future look like when marketing to those that are looking for positions? So marketing forecast is an analysis that projects the future trends, characteristics, and numbers in your target market, which we will go over later what a target market is. The upcoming generation of workers are incredibly different from previous generations with their tendencies, demands, and morals. A successful organization will learn and adapt their marketing plan to appeal to this new generation and how to retain their current workers. So if you could please use your hand feature here. I just have a quick question. How many of you out there have children? I'm just curious to know how many participants we have here. How many of you have children? Okay, so what I'd like you to think about, and this is something that I know when you leave home and you go to work, it may be something that you don't make that connection with, but the generation of individuals that will be working in the different organizations and whatnot are going to eventually be your children's age. So what I want you to think about is the arguments that you have with your children, the interests that they have, a lot of which is hard to connect to as a parent, but just because they take a step within the work environment doesn't mean that their interests change. That doesn't mean that what they do on a daily basis change. So what we need to do is we need to adapt, and we need to think about how we can connect. So some may even be their friends. Some, like I know that I believe her name was her name Brandy, had said that she had a pipeline. So thinking about you make one great connection, and then that person makes a connection who makes a connection. A lot of the times they're probably either close friends or referrals of like-minded people. So that's just something to keep in mind. How does technology come into play? the younger generations that are coming up are going to be more tech savvy, whereas your seasoned veterans, they may be doing their best to learn on the fly and taking that information, and how do you use that to make sure that your mission and values are moving forward. So future workforce options. These are just some ideas that we'd like to present to kind of give everyone an idea about, who could potentially be someone to recruit. So what options are there to consider with the struggling of the candidates? So high school students, the retired population. A lot of people who are retired might be looking for a hobby. They might, at one point in their life, maybe actually worked in the services that we do, or they may have someone in their life where, oh, I love spending time with them, but I didn't even know that that was a potential, I didn't know that was a job. So what do you mean I could possibly go in and spend my day with them, which I love doing every day, and possibly get, compensated for that. So the retired population, individuals without a GED, I know that the state has recently waived that requirement. So an example that I'd like to give would be that I know some individuals who didn't have their GEDs. And so when that became available, I actually reached out to them and told them, did you know that there was an opportunity now? A lot of times people were searching and thinking that things are hopeless. However, that population of people might now be given the opportunity to do and work in our field. So family members of the current staff, thinking about, age, I know 16-year-olds were kind of being explored. So if you have children, grandchildren of current staff, family members are something to consider if that, hasn't been brainstormed within your organization. And then shared living opportunities. Some families might not even know. I actually have a couple friends myself who didn't realize that shared living was an option. They had always kind of been told that, it was either we were with the services or we were not. So that's just another example there of some potential workforce options that may not have been considered yet. So moving forward, we're going to go here and talk about target market. Who are you reaching out to, and where is actually the best to find them? So a target market is a group of people with some shared characteristics that a company has identified as potential customers for its products or services in our situation. Identifying the target market informs the decision-making process as a company designs, packages, markets its product or services. Millennials make up the majority of today's workforce, and this is definitely something to think about. They will make up 75% of the US workforce by 2030. And I know 2030, when you look at that in text, looks like that's a long ways away, but that's 9 years away. So that's really something to consider, where if a majority of today's workforce would be millennials, 9 years from just today, 75% of the workforce is going to be millennials. So if that's not something that your organization has taken into account or come up with the strategy on how to reach them, now would certainly be the time, because if you're thinking about a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, that's right in that window. And so 75% of the workforce is going to be that population. And millennials are very different. I'm sure if many of you had said you had kids, are very different from previous generations in their interests, their lifestyles, and what it is that they value. So this requires businesses and organizations to get creative with their marketing strategies and to reach them. So what do millennials look for? This is an excerpt from an article regarding millennials. Millennials are passionate about issues, not institutions. More than 90% said that they would stop giving to an organization if they began to distrust it. In a reflection of that trust, more than 3/4 would stop giving if they aren't told how their contributions help. So this goes right in with the piece about money. When we're talking about, exposure from the top down, from your CEOs, from those who are in charge, if there isn't communication, if there isn't, a relationship built, just from this study here, more than 90% said they would stop giving to an organization if they began distrusting it. And trust can be, as many of you know, can be taken. It's hard to get back. So if 75% of your workforce by 2030 is going to be this population, and 90% said that they would lose trust, or they would begin distrusting it if they didn't have. So that's just definitely something to consider. And another thing to think about, if 75% of the workforce population is going to be millennials by 2030, we also have Gen Z coming up who are also going to be looking for work, and that's 1996 to 2010, which are also, very different from baby boomers and Gen Z. So Gen X, I'm sorry. So that's just something to consider when marketing out your organization and who it is you're trying to attract. Next, we have brand. What does your organization represent and what do you stand for? Brand is more than a cool logo or a catchy jingle. A company's brand and the public awareness of them is often used as a factor in evaluating a company and what it is that they stand for. A company's brand is what distinguishes them from the competition. So something I'd like you to kind of stop for a second and think about would be, what is your logo? I know a lot of people, and I say here is more than a cool logo, but it doesn't necessarily have to. What I want you to think about is, what is your logo? What does it stand for? Do you ever discuss this? Is it ever mentioned? What was the effort in putting forth your logo, the colors associated with it? How did your organization come up with the name of your organization? Because a lot of times, what to consider is, if an individual, especially, the younger generation, come in and they're interviewing and whatnot, if you have the conversation about what it is that you stand for, the processes that you went through, might be able to capture attention more than just putting out a simple, hey, we're looking for a DSP, because everyone, I'm sure that everyone knows, is looking for employees. I mean, you see a now hiring sign every half mile that you go down the road. Everyone is looking for employees. So when thinking about standing out or actually, making connections with people, what effort was put into what you stand for and what your missions and values are? So what I would like to do is give a little example here. MEORC, our mission is to help customers excel through innovative and collaborative solutions. And our vision is building strong communities. So when thinking about bringing someone in and having a conversation in an interview, is that something that you bring up, or is that something that you ask? I know a lot of times when you go in to an interview, what will be asked is, do you know what our mission is? Do you know what our values are? But sometimes it might be worth it to bring it up yourself and see how they can connect, see how you can explain, what it is and what effort came through and how you are actually putting forth that in the community. And this is my favorite slide here. Promote your history. Inform those potential DSPs how they would be a part of something bigger than themselves. So millennials, think about, how what it is that they're doing connects to the bigger picture. And so what I would like everyone to do is think about, is what you do, can it be more modernized, but then also connect to what it is that you do in your history? Brandy, again, I love that you brought that up, that's something that you use on a regular basis, because I think that although it can be powerful and sometimes it can be uncomfortable, it's important to know where we came from in our field and then where we're going. So, our field isn't perfect. I'm sure everyone knows that. But where we came from and where we are today is huge. It's a massive difference. So your organization is probably not that much different where you started from and then where you're moving from to today and in the future. It's going to take some work, but it's important to think about the future. And innovation. What is your organization doing differently? Innovation is quite literally a new method or idea. Ohio has over 10,000 service providers. The need to stand out and be noticed is more important than ever in today's workforce shortage. Innovation can stem from a provider utilizing technology and media more than its competition, or creating a new ADS concept when its surrounding competitors are following an old-fashioned style. Use what you have around you. This is something that I think is important for, when you market out the actual position of a DSP. More and more potential workforce applicants are looking for jobs that are not only rewarding financially, but in other ways as well. trips to local hotspots with individuals, as an example, Hocking Hills, the Zanesville Clay Museum, and local sporting events. Those are just a few examples of community integration that can be captured and bring in some attention. Being a DSP can be fun. As an organization, you can use these ideas and locations to market your opportunities and sell how rewarding and enjoyable a DSP position can be. So one thing I would like to do before I get to this next slide here is, has anyone here, before you're in the position that you are today, or we may even have some DSPs here, think about the most fun day that you had as a DSP, if you had been a DSP before your current position. Think about that day that you're never going to forget because you were with an individual, you were doing something that they love, that you love. Think about that day that you'll never forget, no matter how high you go in your current organization, or if you change and you're in a completely different field. Think about that day as a DSP that you will never forget and was just one of the most fun days that you've ever had. Think about that. And if we could get maybe one person at least to share what it is that day looked like for them. And I know, Penny, you said you were a DSP at one point too. So if no one has any stories to do, I mean, I'm going to share mine next, but what I would like is to have at least one person who was previously a DSP give me that day that they're never going to forget.
Okay, Kessler, I will.
Okay.
So I remember we were on a trip to Cedar Point, and we probably had roughly 30 people we support there, as well as staff. And I remember being back at the hotel and sitting around the pool and watching everybody have such a good time. And I remember thinking, I can't believe I get paid for this. Like it was just such a memorable experience, and just getting people to, or watching people have new experiences and how excited they got. So yeah, that's probably one of my best days. We had many trips, but that was one of them. I remember standing in the Outer Banks and watching a 55-year-old man who had never seen the ocean before just stand in awe of the ocean. And that was pretty amazing too.
So how I wanted to thank you, Penny. How I wanted to segue into this is promote what works. Marketing the fun things that you can do as a DSP. A lot of the times what we see in a DSP posting, they look identical. If you were to take one company's DSP, what a DSP is, and compare that to another organization's, they would almost look like mirrors, except with a different logo on the top left or so. So how can you make your description stand out? Usually what it looks like: personal care, housekeeping duties, and then outcome focused, which we use terms that maybe people who are interested in our field might not understand, and then they just take it and look away and think that that's probably too much for me to understand. I'm just going to look elsewhere. So what I'd like to do is share my example here. I was actually a DSP, and one of the individuals that I worked with was a huge football fan, and I'm a huge Lions fan, and I know that is really tough. It is really tough being a Lions fan, but he was a huge fan of the Bengals, and he watched them all the time and was really interested, but he never thought it would be possible to go to a game. I actually asked him, and he said, "Oh, there's no way I could afford that." And I said, "Well, buddy, the Lions are terrible, so tickets are really cheap when they play the Lions." So we looked up the prices, and I took him to go to the Detroit Lions Cincinnati football game on Christmas Eve, where we dressed up. We wore Christmas tree hats. We wore Santa Claus hats. We got all dressed up and we went down there. And to this day, every time I see him, he brings that up. And I know that, I mean, as long as he lives, that's going to be something that is going to be a connection with us. So the reason that I think that that is important is because those are the types of stories, and those are the things that you can say, do you enjoy or do you enjoy sports? This individual that you could work with in a matching setting loves sports. How can we bring in someone? Because I was a college student at that time, And although that I've grown up in this field because my dad's worked in this field, that's something that if I were to look at a job description and say, I would like to do this while I go get my degree, or, you know, going to a football game, because the company that I was with, I mean, they put it all together for us. I mean, we paid for it and whatnot, but they put it together for us and everything. So those are just some ideas that you can use to market out. You know, we have individuals that love these topics, these things, and how can we connect people to them from our community and actually, you know, have a not only just an employee, but a serious friendship that develops. I still talk to, you know, this individual, he plays on the basketball team. So I would go there and occasionally watch him. So these are connections that can go further than not just, you know, marketing out a DSP position, but actually create some community connections. I don't think we have time for a break. I think I took a little bit more time than I would like, so I'll just go ahead and skip through this here. So for financial compensation, why isn't money working? The upcoming job force is looking for more than just an increase in pay. Providers have attempted to increase base salaries, bonuses, incentives, but has not proved beneficial. Why is that? Money, although still important, isn't the end all when considering where to work anymore. Employees are considering work-life balance, hours of operation, advancement opportunities, holidays off, PTO accrual, and much more. These are just some examples that, you know, Meork's team, our provider support team, we've heard from interviews with DSPs, you know, holidays off, PTO accrual. These are things that I guess, you know, going into a conversation with the DSP that we would have never made that connection. Most of the time when you think about what does DSP want, initially right off the top of your head, you think money. However, these are just as important. The simple notion of more money equals more workers has become outdated. So what does the workforce want? The workforce crisis is a challenge not only for the developmental disabilities field, but other careers as well. If you look around your local town, there are now hiring signs left and right. So the competition is fierce. There seems to be a power shift from we need each other to you, which is the employer, need me, the potential job applicant, more than I need you. And that seems to be, you know, a challenge that we have to consider because of there's such a crisis. You know, the leverage seems like it's shifted in that regard. This requires organizations to become more creative and market the other amazing things that you do to bring in some individuals. So this is a short little video here. It starts out, seems like it goes off on a little tangent, but it all comes back in the end and it's fantastic. So I'd love for everybody to watch this. It's called Start With the Why by Simon Sinek.
A lot of people don't realize that I actually hated reading for the majority of my life. By the time I was 18, I don't think I had really read a single book unless it was part of an assignment and I was just forced to do it. But ever since I went to first grade, my teachers constantly tried to inspire me to read, and it never worked. It just made me hate it even more. And then finally, when I was about 18 or so, I started to find mentors, most of them online, and they were able to inspire me to read almost instantly. And now I can't even imagine a life where I don't read. So what was the difference between my teachers, who tried to inspire me to read for 12 years and failed constantly, and my mentors who were able to do it in basically no time? Well, here it is in the context of the golden circle. My teacher started with the what. You have to read this classic. This is a great book. You have to. Then they sometimes went to the how and said, this is how you read it. But that was it. There was no why. The funny thing is, if I'd asked, why should I read it? They would probably get angry and start yelling. How could you ask a stupid question like that? What do you mean, why should you read a classic? And that anger would mostly come from the fact that they haven't really thought about the why. So they can't really clearly articulate it. Most people, and even most organizations, don't really know why they do what they do. But how are my mentors different from my teachers at school? They had successful relationships, they had success in their businesses, and they said, look, Do you want your girlfriend to be attracted to you? Do you want to build a successful business? Do you want to create powerful relationships instead of always getting your emails ignored just like everyone else? And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I want. And they were like, okay, good, then pick up a book. Oh, and by the way, How to Win Friends and Influence People is a great book. So is The Way of the Superior Man. And I picked up both of those books and read them, and now reading is an inseparable part of my life. That is how great leaders inspire action. Everybody starts from the what, and most people never even get to the why. Most people create a product and they want to tell you about all the amazing features and specifications. They want to tell you about how these features work so well. But the truth is, most people don't care about your what and how. Most people don't want to be told the exact measurements of your CPU. They don't want to be told how the little chips interact with each other so amazingly. They want to be told something like this: we value efficiency just like you do. Here's how we can help you be more efficient. And here's a product that will help you achieve exactly that. And that's exactly what I want to buy. If you tell me my company's going to be more efficient, I want to know more. If you tell me how great your newest chip is, I don't really care. So again, most people start from the what and never even get to the why. You're not going to make that mistake. You're going to know your why, and you're going to start with it because you realize that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
So how I'd like to bring that back and use that as an example is something that you as a provider can do to bring in some DSPs, or possibly market your organization the correct way, would be that one thing that you can say, and this is just an example, we value people, so do you. We want to help people, and so do you. So this is why the DSP position is important in our society, and how this is the kind of change that you can make. Now, would you like to apply to be a DSP? So start with the why, start with how their efforts are contributing to society, how they're making a change. And, these things like going back to the fantastic ideas that you can take a person to a football game, that you can watch someone look at the ocean for the first time and reflect on what it's like, being small in the world. Those are the things that are priceless. And so making that connection and marketing your organization as the fantastic thing that it is, you're helping people with developmental disabilities live a life and possibly reach those things that they aspire to do, the important to them, and also assisting, with the force. So that's something just to consider. I'd like to thank you all for your time. Hopefully you guys had a fantastic lunch while you were sitting and having conversations with each other and with us. So hopefully this information was helpful and you guys can use it moving forward.
Does anybody have any questions or anything that you'd like clarification on? We've got just a few more minutes. Okay. Silence is agreement, Kessler.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. This is our last slide here, and we are doing a recruitment similar in style. We will be going over, hopefully, stemming conversations, asking questions just to create thoughts. And so we hope to see everybody that attended today there for the next one.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone.